Right. Good morning, Javier, and hello and greetings to anybody else who's with us. So Javier has been doing some really interesting work recently, developing ideas related to timing. And Javier, you're also adding to your ongoing reflections of your adventures in religious studies, or you're pursuing something philosophical, but formally you're in a program of religious studies. So I wanted to begin with an example. Maybe this example that language gives us can help anchor our discussion of timing. It's an example of this well-known phrase, kicking someone when he's down, right? So when I say we shouldn't kick him, or they kicked him when he was down. So it's an expression that has to do with timing. So in a sense, when you say you're kicking him when he's down, you're suggesting that you're getting timing of your kick. You're getting the timing of your attack right. But nevertheless, you should not be doing that.
Mm.
You say that when we talk about timing, getting the timing right, we're referring usually to the conditions, and we are being aware of how the conditions of our actions, the conditions of our decisions are always in a state of unfolding and changing. And because those conditions are always unfolding, they could seem more or less harmonious with an action. And then you also, I think you're critical of always seeming in harmony. So for example, it's the reason why this example came to my mind was because of your own encouragement. You encourage us to be critical of like getting things in the right, superficially getting things in the right time, getting timing right, like getting married right after you get out of college, and then getting a job. It's similar to kicking someone. It's very effective to kick someone when they're down if your intention is to hit them. But you can also make a case for attacking someone or kicking someone when they're the most strong, because then you can have a confrontation with them, and you also would reveal your own strength. So hopefully this would be a fruitful beginning for our conversations. Any feedback so far?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, kicking someone down. It's always interesting because it's like when someone says that, like framing, it's like even the victim has to give like a type of value to like their current state of being. Like, you know, you're kicking me down when I am vulnerable right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because it's like, yeah, I mean, you're right. Like I am very critical of like this kind of like objectification of like time. Because like, for example, I don't know, have you heard the parable of like the Chinese farmer before?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's exactly like that. Like this notion of being kicked down, where things kind of happen to the Chinese farmer, and everybody's like, oh, like, you know, this happened, like maybe it's a good thing, you know. And then the farmer always responds with like, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, maybe, right? Because you can't ever determine how things are really going to unfold, even in the moment of its happening. So even like the notion of like being kicked down in that moment, in that objectification, it is maybe like a horrible experience. Yet there is something about that happening that even grants the possibility of it not being a horrible experience. That might take and cultivate years or 10 years before that, you know. It might, the kicking might have, my cat wants to be in the way.
Sure.
The kicking down might have cultivated in a type of realization of like, you know, when somebody kicked me down, I gave too much value to something that I thought was existential to my identity. And in, I think some ways we try to protect each other from conserving our identity. But of course, there's always just like, you know, the sort of, I guess, general rude, like kicking down, you know. But I do think to kind of be a little bit Nietzschean, and in a sense, there is some pragmatism to being the enemy, as Nietzsche points out, being the enemy instead of the friend.
Right.
Because I think being a friend, at least the way Nietzsche seems to understand it, is like, you don't allow the person to come into any conflict, any real conflict with what is going on. So in that sense, if you're playing the enemy, you're allowing them, promoting them, some type of tension, some type of struggle. And I think in that case, kicking down is perhaps beneficial in a way.
Mm.
But it really depends. It definitely carries a lot of context and timing. you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And what the overall purpose is in that interaction. Sometimes because we value our enemies or our competitors, we have we have an interest in maintaining them or maintaining their strength and maintaining our bonds with them, maintaining an ongoing relationship with a nemesis who you kind of derive your identity with that relationship sometimes. So I want to tell you something about why this topic resonates with me a lot.
Mm.
So I transitioned. I did a career transition recently, and I'm in an industry now where I'm starting from the bottom again, bottom of the food chain. And my colleagues around me are in their 20s, and I am this almost 40-year-old guy who has all this baggage of life experience, the baggage of experience from elsewhere uh, that doesn't really fit in this context. And the first couple of weeks, I kept thinking with myself, like, the timing of this job is just wrong. I'm in the wrong time. I'm in the wrong timeline. And I wanted to ask you this question because I'm sure you have classmates in your program who are young, who don't have your life experience. There's also this other friend, a new friend that I'm following on YouTube. His name is Grant, and he's also an older gentleman. He went back to study English literature,
Mm.
and he talks a lot about his awareness of the young people around him in classes, how they are like so sure, so full of themselves. They're like, they don't want to read the classics, for example, like how the attitudes of young people. And then more importantly for us is that you are there. You are there. What does that mean? The fact that you are there, is that indicative of you getting something wrong? Are you like out of sync with the world? Do you feel out of sync with the world? Like, do you feel like you're now on the wrong timeline? Because I certainly feel that way. So
Mm.
I wanted to like ask you about that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had situations where in class, I think I kind of fool people because for them, I kind of look like I am relatively young to them, like the same age. But it isn't until I start speaking and sort of like sharing some of my insights about, subjects or something like that, that they start going like, become a little puzzled as if like, until one time the person sitting next to me goes, "I'm sorry, I have to ask, like, how old are you?" you know? and I really felt the pain of that question,
Yeah,
but I mean, Daniel, actually, this is a good conversation into, I think your question is a good conversation into what Daniel and I were talking about yesterday.
mhm,
Daniel said something like, sometimes we forget about the necessity of self-forgetting,
yeah,
this sort of self-forgetting. And I think when I look back at like my life and my decisions, there's there's so many moments where I'm like, there's clearly a point in time where I could have never joined the army. I could have just never done any of that. And I could have just stayed with what I thought was the best. I think I probably would have ended up in a lot of school debt. I still didn't really know what I wanted out of school. And so I think when I look at my life now and my decisions is that for me, even though perhaps in a sort of utilitarian way, it seems like I am out of place. I am sort of behind some type of timeline. However, when I look at the conditions that I was in um, before I made such decisions, there was a sense of which I was not ready. I was not ready at all. And it's in fact possible that I would have made a huge mistake with whatever I would have chosen. So in that sense, I kind of look at it like if I reminisce on the conditions that I was in, the position that I am now, to me, it makes sense. Makes
right.
perfect sense. I am.
And it's possible that maybe the older we get, the more we help other people make sense of us. For example, you might have had similar comments at a younger age. A younger Javier would have been able to converse similarly because your character, your style is kind of parts of it persist through time. But in the past, maybe your classmates or your peers would have a harder time making sense of it. They would have said, okay, where is this coming from? But now they can explain. Remember that exact phrase that your peer asked was, I have to ask. I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Why do you have to ask? Why do you have to ask? Because you need an explanation. You need something to help you make sense of the depth of this person who is talking, who seems to be aware of more things. So, oh, okay. Okay, so you have a little bit older age. Now I can like incorporate it. So I think sometimes that some of us begin being out of place, but that out of placeness is invisible to other people. And when we get older, we bring more visibility to that out of placeness. We kind of show it. We can't help but show it in different ways. Like when I was a younger person, I felt out of place, but that out of placeness was very difficult to communicate to other people. I just felt like this is wrong. But now people just take a look and say, okay, this is not, this guy is, something is up with this guy. Because
It's weird because there is like, I've noticed, the more that I spend time in class and I have conversations there, I've noticed that there's a kind of like gravity um, that I seem to like attract with the younger kids. Even though I don't feel like I'm that much older, but for them, I am like 10 years like plus on them. So, but when I notice that some of them get really like, fascinated as if like I am some like type of wealth of knowledge to kind of like sit around or just listen, even if they don't really want advice, but there's like a kind of like fascination for some of them. And it's always interesting to me that, some of them will pull me to the side and just like, continuing about the conversation that I had, raised in class or something like that. I mean, some of them get so fascinated that they really want to just take me to the side and ask all the questions that they want to ask, like, how did you do this? How did you get here? Like, all this sort of stuff. They're just really fascinated. But so there's a kind of gravity. But I think this notion of misplacement that you're talking about, I think this is something, because I've been really into Derrida lately. I've been like Caputo, Derrida. There's something about Derrida where he's saying about like we need to deregularize our subjectivity, and I think being out of place is something like that, where it's like you notice that you are in a different form of subjectivity than everybody else. And also, I think when I'm entering into the school and I'm meeting these, new people, new young people, if I get the sense of feeling of like out of place, I start to understand that actually what I'm engaging in is a new form of subjectivity that I've never experienced.
right, that's great. I also wanted to ask you, what do you perceive to be the general sentiment regarding people pursuing this program of religious studies? What is that in general, and then what is your kind of purpose in that pursuit? And do you see some kind of asynchrony with, or not asynchrony, but difference between your attitude towards religious studies and some of your peers?
Yeah, so I'm actually glad you brought this up.
Me too.
So there's quite a difference, an extreme difference in this case.
Wow.
What I've begun to realize, unfortunately, is that a lot of the people that are in religious studies are kind of just there to, I guess, either to simply deconstruct religion like completely, in the sense of like, I guess, an attack-ish, be critical of it, or they simply are there to affirm what they already believe, basically, which is really shocking to me. I mean, just because like of all the classes that I've already taken, I mean, for me, it has only made me more open-minded, really. I mean, once you start really engaging with like the history of religion is really the history of society. I mean, that is what I am grasping when I learn about the Middle East and about other countries, because I mean, it's so just you can't separate the two. It's really about the history of the world, in this case. Um, but you begin to see how religions sort of interact with each other, and how people sort of take piece by piece, and it seems like religion, in my experience, has been a way to not only oppress but also to subvert the oppression. Actually, this is something ironic that I've witnessed, is that when somebody are in a religious state that they are not happy with, they find some type of way through another religious construction to subvert a new way of life, and to go into a new way of living. So in this case, they have to take parts from Christianity or from like a Persian religion, and combine them together to go against the oppressive grain. But yeah, it's unfortunately that does seem to be the case. That's what I've noticed.
We can describe it as like they are searching for ammunition. They go to religious studies to get more ammunition. They already know which side they're on. And yeah, that's a very youthful thing. Even though when you're
Yeah.
young, you're supposed to kind of search for the bigger picture, not just ammunition. You want to learn what kind of fight do I want to have? Which side of the fight do I want to be in? How much do I want to? What are the principles according to which I engage in this in battles? But yeah, it seems like a certainty, a youthful certainty. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have with me a John Caputo book, which is
Oh,
Introduction to
okay.
Hermeneutics.
Yeah. I
But
haven't read that.
how did you come across his work? I don't think he's very. I mean, he did engage with some of the continental philosophers, including Derrida, but he himself is not that. I don't think he's that well known. He did.
Yeah, he's not. It's funny because like Zizek kind of shadows everybody in this moment of time.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
right. That's right.
he is really, and like I've watched some speeches on YouTube from Caputo, and Zizek, as Caputo says, Zizek is a rock star. He's a rock star. He really
Yeah.
is. But there is something about Caputo that I really like, because it's like he's taking Derrida and he's throwing religion into the mix. And when you combine deconstruction with religion, you get something really fascinating. I mean, and I think Caputo is on the edge of like this very fascinating understanding where it's like, he wrote books like a weak God, what does a weak God entail? And this notion of the event, and his reading of Derrida is such a, I feel like I am reading like a sci-fi novel when I'm reading Caputo's passion for Derrida, because it feels like what he's talking about feels so impossible, but it's like a beauty for the impossible. It's a passion for the impossible, that I just really fall in love with. Because it's like, when you read about Heidegger, for example, Heidegger is all about the horizon of possibilities, right? Or Derrida is like the complete opposite. The possible is what is programmable, is what can stagnate us. But the passion for the impossible, that is something that leads us to new forms of subjectivity, and something like that.
Right.
And that is something I don't know what that about is, but that is something that I really have been feeling like deeply into the core of my being lately. This sort of like, I feel like if I were to describe like the way you should live life, it would be exactly those three words, or passion, or four words, right? Passion for the impossible.
Right. Yeah.
You
Yeah. There is this. There's a reason why I also, from a stylistic and literary perspective, I relate to people like Derrida, because for me, they always seem to have a gentler touch, a gentler grasp, a restraint that doesn't want to pin things down. Like, okay, God is omniscient, like these two concepts go together, and these two concepts go together, and there's a line here, you can't cross this line. And that's by being more diffuse, by being more loosening their grasp, they allow things to move, and they allow kind of crossing of this, maybe this concept can cross this boundary and see what happens if it does that. So uh, it's a very non-strict and non-demanding. So it allows things to develop on their own. It also, as you were speaking about different attitudes towards religion and oppression, the role of religion, I remembered a book by by Thomas Tweed. It's called Crossing and Dwelling. The main thesis of the book is captured in the title, Crossing and Dwelling. So he argues that religion is a way in which people create boundaries, create, let's say, stages, even like stages of development. Like many religions have this, like these are the steps you have to go through to get to, I don't know, spiritual enlightenment. But these are not for the purpose of dividing us or separating things. They're also for the purpose of designing ways of crossing these boundaries. So for example, you and I are different, separate, but okay, once we identify that, how do we then connect? How do we then cross these boundaries? So it's not just separation for the sake of separation. And religion, he says that we now overestimate the separating and oppressing task of religion, and we underestimate its role in helping us cross these boundaries and like deconstruct, as you alluded to.
Yeah. There's something about because I've been reading, the book that I'm reading right now is Prayers and Tears of Jacques Derrida by Caputo, and I think that book is like, just, there's something like deeply poetic about it, the way Caputo just like talks about Derrida, which is like, it just feels like beautiful. It feels very romantic, like you can tell he has like a very strong passion for Derrida. But there's something about, he talks about in the book about this indeterminable faith, because when we start talking about determinable faiths, we have, Islam, Christianity, and so on. But Derrida is really trying to free this idea of faith. Like, it's funny because when we talk about a religion, it's like, we don't really even use faith, really. It's like, we're already talking about what we know, what is, like, yes, I know, Jesus' second coming. I know that, there's heaven and hell. Like, there's all these things. And yet we talk about faith as if it's just like a sort of word that we throw around, because there's nothing that seems faith-like in any of the determinations that people are talking about within their faiths, within their religion.
Yeah.
And I really like the way Caputo is abstracting Derrida, trying to interpret Derrida in such a sense that, he's trying to say, look, Derrida wants faith to be something that you have a passion for the impossible. Like that is what faith is. You don't really know what it is, so to speak. And that is like a real radicalization of faith. And I think decision making, and I think a lot of my timing with my philosophy of timing is kind of exactly that I'm trying to expose. Like, actually, when you're making a decision, there is a deep faith, because even though you are trying to take everything that any construction, right? You have all these materials, your memories, your past experiences, your friends' advice and everything like that. There's still something that is completely exposed, open, wounded, that you have no idea what could possibly come out from this decision. You can only make your best, to use a Kierkegaardian language, your best leap of faith in this case.
Yeah. And the more under pressure we are, the more like in a crisis-laden situation we are, the more we can relate to this. I recently heard from one of my friends that he moved to Canada during COVID, and the company that gave him work visa or facilitated his move, he moved here, and 2 weeks later he got fired. So he had all these cost of living, rent, and no job all of a sudden. And COVID, like, how to find a job and how to take care of my family. He and his wife were living together. So that's like, when I listened to him, he had a passion for the impossibility of now making it in this new environment. After getting fired, with no prospects, and he made it because he had the passion. He had lots. He said, you wouldn't believe the kinds of works that I did. It was like in the snowy weather, he was like patching things on and building walls.
Wow.
Uh, and yeah, it is the passion for impossible. It's something that enables us to do things, it sounds, that we would never otherwise even think of doing. Like the
Mhm.
whole idea of leading or living a revolutionary life is about being able to question the current state of affairs to the point where you can actually do something to maybe change it. Even if you can't, like this, your decision to go into religious studies is already to me an embodiment of that passion for the impossible. Because the world
Yeah.
we live in right now doesn't
Mhm.
encourage this decision.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
It doesn't. And yet, and you know that,
Yeah, I do.
you're aware of that, and
Mhm.
yet you do it.
Mhm.
That's the beauty of it, as opposed to somebody who just is in denial. Somebody who's in denial is like, no, 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 I can make it. I can, if they're just within their own insulated religious community, they might be out of touch with what might be going on outside. But
Yeah, and I felt that. Like if it weren't really for my friends' sort of like input in this,
mhm,
because I was willing to melt myself in the background of a sort of utilitarian thinking,
yeah,
because I just couldn't cope with the what if. I couldn't mentally cope with the what if.
yeah,
But if it weren't for my friends eventually coming back to me, and they said we have a solution for you,
mhm,
because the thing for them, and this was not just them, I mean, this was also the gardeners, they kind of occasionally brought this up as well, casually brought this up. They're like, this is strange that you did this. This is strange that you decided to not go for religious studies, because we all know, everybody knows that I have a passion for this. Like,
mhm, mhm,
everybody knows.
yeah,
And yet they all felt like if I was cheating myself for not doing this, for not pursuing this. Um, and once I realized that there was this group of people that saw my own passion in this, and even though they gave me like solutions like, well, if all else fails, I can always go back into the army and become a chaplain. And I had never even thought of the possibility of becoming a chaplain, actually. But when that occurred to me, I said, well, wow. I mean, I never even, that was never even on the horizon of possibilities, really.
yeah,
And I'm still entertaining the idea, but I'm still kind of, I'm still open to whatever will come to arise next. But really, if it weren't for the fact that my friends sort of had this self-reflection of my own passion for it, and I finally realized, like, yeah, I mean, I would be not taking a risk if I just let this slip away.
mhm,
And I have been struggling. I mean, even my past videos about genuine risk, I was really struggling about what does it mean to take a genuine risk. And finally, like I finally understood in some
yeah,
way. I really do feel like this is my first genuine risk in life. Like
yeah.
this was the first real decision that didn't necessarily offer a safety, a great outcome for money, security, anything like that.
Mhm, mhm.
You know.
And what is really beautiful about it is that it's such a calm thing. It is a genuine risk, but it's embracing a kind of calm and scholarly life of risk, of really high degree of
Yeah.
risk. I think the reason why our group or our community doesn't support us in these kind of cases before you cross that boundary is because part of that decision, part of that risk, part of what makes that risk genuine is that you have to fly solo in that
Mhm.
that moment at least. It's kind of like when parents tell the kid, don't go into art, don't become an artist, don't don't sacrifice a life of comfort, and then the child or the offspring, they decide to do it anyways. And once they cross that boundary, then the parents also become supportive. But in
Mhm.
retrospect, the parents say, oh, at that point I had to be against you, so you prove that you had enough resistance, you had enough internal drive to kind of push yourself and cross the boundary, and then we will be with you after you cross. But that initial crossing seems like it has to be a solo activity because the community is, for the most part, conservative. The community is very cautious and wants to protect its members. But there's a secret, I think, at the same time, we want people to occasionally violate these conventions, violate the principles of caution, and just
Mm.
go out and get into new territory. And it would be a personal risk for them,
Mm.
but we would be, the gains would be for everybody. Yeah.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those things where I think a lot of people, when they decide to take a risk, they initially, I don't think they understand the possibility of failure sometimes. But for me, when I decided to take this risk, I decided with the intent of like, you know what, even if I fail, even if I don't use this degree, I'm not going to make it a source of like regret, a source of anything, you know, because I genuinely wanted to do this decision. I was passionate for this decision. And there's so many people that, you know, they have this look of like, you know, that's like not going to be a, a useful degree, you know.
Yeah, the elephant in
You
the
know,
room,
there is something,
yeah,
there is something about that. And so it's so funny, you know, when they bring like, oh, what are you studying? And I'm like, religious studies. And, you know, I even had a conversation the other day. I met this one guy's girlfriend, and she said, oh, religious studies, like, you know, how brave of you. You know,
yeah, that's great. So if you don't mind me, I think now that we've had this conversation, maybe we can, I want to talk about 3 archetypes
Mm,
of action in relation to conditions and timing. So
mm,
uh, I hope that our listeners also bear with me. The first archetype is somebody who looks for the conditions and acts appropriately. So acts based on what the conditions demand, what the conditions require. And that could be the archetype of the opportunistic person.
mm,
The second is somebody who looks at the conditions and sees, okay, the conditions are not hospitable to this action, but I can make them hospitable. Let's say you know somebody, you're romantically interested in them, they're not interested in you, they might not even know you, but you kind of start pursuing them, and you transform the situation. You bring about the conditions. Maybe you induce a change of heart in the other person, or maybe you persuade a group to do something, to go to war or whatever. The third archetype is the Don Quixote archetype,
mm,
who knows that the conditions are inhospitable, they are contrary, they're opposed, and they will remain opposed and unfriendly, and yet they will go on that, they will pursue their course of action regardless.
mm, mm, mm.
And that might be, I don't know, more the tragic scenario, the tragic action. Or and I think you and I both have this maybe personality temperament. We're cursed, we have this curse that you want to kind of swing between the second and third archetype. I
Mm.
can't see myself being an opportunistic person. I was like, oh, these days, like being an engineer in the oil industry would be great, so I'll do this. Or that would be, for me, that would be really painful to follow that, to kind of look at the pulse of the economy or society and then just follow that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny because there's always like this artificial pulse. Um, you know, that I think that's like the opportunistic one. That's like this is artificial pulse, because I think the artificial pulse is kind of similar to like the trolley problem that philosophers have obsessed about. When really, if you think about the real philosophical, the real natural pulse, the real natural pulse is that actually um, it's crossing the road. It's a very simple problem that you encounter in your everyday life. But actually, what's fascinating is that if you try to make an opening, you actually risk the possibility of a driver hitting you. And the same thing with a driver trying to make himself a passing, he also risks the possibility of hitting someone. But if we all sort of like patiently just wait for the natural opening to arise, which is funny because most of the time we don't want to, because, you know, we're running late, we have places to be, we got places to go. So we start trying to make openings.
Yeah.
We try to be opportunistic of this. But there is a sort of natural opening that it just avails itself. It's like, if you just wait 2 seconds longer, you can just cross the street. You don't even have to worry about the car hitting you. But because you want to cross it right now, you risk the possibility of getting it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Because it's funny because and then I'll pass it on to you, is that
No.
I was walking to class and I run into this problem every single time. And it's always funny because I have to laugh. There's somebody that feels that they have to stop because they want the car to pass. But the funny thing is that nobody else wants to stop. So you have this group, this half group of some people are stopping because they want the car to pass. And then there's this group of people that just keep going, right?
Yeah.
Until finally, I remember I heard a girl that was, she was waiting. She was one of the people that got caught up with the people waiting. And she's like, she said in the most vulgar way, she's like, fuck it. Who cares? They're bad drivers if they can't wait. And
Yeah.
she went anyways.
Yeah. 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 Do you think it's some of it is ego that we insist? You said like I need to pass right now. Could it be like just the ego-centeredness of the person who cannot find the opening outside? Because the opening is kind of you have to pay attention to the world, not
Mm,
just yourself.
mm. Yeah, I think it is a little bit ego because it's like when you're trying to make an opening, you're already assuming what you want. You already know exactly where you want to go, what you want to do. Nothing is going to impede in that fashion. Nothing is going to impede in that.
Yeah.
And that's the danger of like, you know, and that's the thing that I always keep open is that when I make a decision, I know very well that I am assuming I know what I want. But that's the risk of any decision,
Yeah.
right? Until I meet somebody else, until some event happens that I go, maybe that's not what I want. It goes back to the whole, you know, parable of the Chinese farmer. I go, maybe,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Maybe. Who knows?
Hmm.
Yeah. Who knows? I don't know. I have another example to bring in here. I don't know how relevant it is. We will see. So, as part of my job now, as part of my day job, I need to kind of talk to people, talk talk to people who are very different from me, including investors who manage um, sometimes billions of dollars. And I need to kind of conduct a conversation with them and give them some information, and it's an exchange of information. But there is the danger of over empathizing with them. For me, I realize that some of them seem to be in a rush. They have like, okay, I have like 1 minute. What is it? I have 1 minute for you, or I don't care about this. Like, this is not important. This is not something I want to do. And if I over empathize with it, like in that case, the example that you talked about, this would be over empathizing with the driver's attitude, that the driver wants to cross, wants to, like, maybe doesn't care about the passengers. And I realized that I can actually a little bit like gently disregard their rush, gently disregard their emotional tone, and kind of bring in my perspective of, no, we kind of, it would be nice to have this conversation. Something might come out of it. And this opening that we might discover doesn't belong to me and it doesn't belong to them. It is there as part of the conversation. It's an objective or intersubjective feature of our conversation that we can both discover together uh, as a consequence of slowing down a little bit and not over empathizing with our own subjectivity or the subjectivity of the other person. It's a something that is not, I'm not oppressing the other person, but I'm also not being oppressed or not completely letting the conversation be dictated by their lack of interest. It's a very difficult thing to do. Timing is not timing. There's the timing that is internal to an existing hierarchy, and there are also timings that come from outside, and sometimes they interfere. They invite the existing timeline to pause and be patient and see what else might be there.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I'm glad you brought up work stuff because, you know, I work at an urgent care,
Mm,
and my goodness, I mean, everything is urgent, right?
sure.
But it's funny because urgent care is kind of like a little bit of a misnomer because it's also not supposed to be an emergency.
Yeah.
So what I end up encountering a lot is that the patients will say it's urgent, and then they tell me what it is. I'm like, no, no, that's not an urgency. That's an emergency. That's like, you came to the wrong place, I'm afraid.
Wow.
Um, that is something that I because I'm a medical receptionist,
Mhm.
I'm the first face that has to encounter and a patient's problems and exaggerations, or even they underestimate even their own problems. But
Sure.
the thing that I've noticed is that eventually I cannot empathize any longer with them, because actually if a patient arrives to me and is like telling me the story, they're like crying on the desk and so on and so on, it's like actually what they're doing is, and it's funny because it might seem unsympathetic, but what is happening is that they're actually, in my opinion, they're stalling their time for me to check them in, right?
Right.
Because I need them to answer questions, sign forms, so that way they can be seen.
Yeah.
Sometimes as much as I want to sit there and listen to their sort of story, I'm like, I kind of have to push them along, because it's like, you can say all that stuff when you get pulled in the back.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not trying to be heartless, but there are people that are waiting in line. There are people that are wanting to tell me the same things that you are saying about themselves.
Yeah.
So I have to be like a sort of I don't want to say cold, but I have to be like, I listen, and then I say, okay, here, sign this form. Sign this form. Like, I just like, I have to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I have to. And that's one of the things that it, I guess it's never the wrong time per se for them to say those things, but it's like, here you can see that there's another time that is sort of being um, erupting, which
Yeah.
is the other time erupting is that everybody else also wants a say in what is going on,
Sure. Sure.
right? And I am actually being the mediator between who allows time to
Yeah.
appear in this
Yeah.
case,
Yeah.
which is interesting, because they always ask me how long, how long, how long, and I have to guess how long sometimes, because sometimes we only have one provider, sometimes we have two, sometimes the provider's in the back doing like sutures and stuff that takes a little bit longer. What really cracks me up is when they say, I shouldn't be waiting, I made an appointment. And I love saying this next line. It's like my favorite line. I said, yeah, they are the people that are in front of you, they also have appointments.
Yeah. 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 I really find that interesting. That paradox of the paradox that you're pointing to is the idea that you have to calm down to speed things up. If you want to speed things up, if you want this to happen efficiently, you kind of have to calm down and cooperate with me and answer these pragmatic questions. It's very similar to that paradox of care, that a surgeon needs to pretend that the body is like a machine to be able to effectively save it or fix it. If the surgeon cares too much, it's like doing surgery on her or his child. It would be like that kind of care would interfere with the surgery. It might, even though that care is like, oh, I care a lot about this, but that backfires. Similar with that rushing. If you rush too much, you actually don't get things done. We always, like I myself, rush things that shouldn't be rushed, because like we want things to happen quick, right? We want to get things over with. And that's the mistake. We shouldn't want that. We should want things to be over. It's kind of like maybe a concealed death wish. It's like, I just want everything to be done, you know? But no, what we want, what we should want, what we ought to be mindful of and want is like to think to go to for things to go in their own natural course, their optimal course, time course. But that's very difficult. That's kind of, demands that it would demand from us to step back and give other things, give outside things distance, enough love for them to kind of like raising a child. Gonna have to step back, give the child their own time to play, to discover things. Yeah. And somehow I think this is also connected to studying religion, being in a religious studies, wanting ammunition versus wanting to discover something. if you want ammunition, you kind of want to fast forward things. It's like, okay, just I want to go through it quick. Just give me the argument so I can all the tools so I can defend my religion or attack other people's religion.
Yeah.
But yeah, we can want other things. We can want more meaningful things.
Yeah, that's the thing that I've realized, over the course of like time, is that I live my life assuming I know what I desire until somebody comes along the way and they propose something that you just never had anticipated before. And then you go, maybe that's what I desire. Maybe that's something I desire more than that. And it does kind of require sort of a self-forgetting, as Daniel says. You need to have a sort of self-forgetting to sort of allow space and distance for things to sort of manifest and play out the way it's supposed to play out. Of course, that itself is a risk because we don't know what it's going to
Of
play
course.
out.
Yeah, of
It's
course.
that sense of control that we always want. And that's why I kind of like this story of Don Quixote, because it's like this man wants to become a knight, and yet at the same time, he dies for it. But it's like it's strange, but it's almost like a beautiful thing to die for the impossible.
Yeah.
That he could not, because he could never be actually a knight, but he attempted to be so. He was in his mind a knight.
Yeah.
And was it there's this recent concept of, have you read Plato's Timaeus before, or Timaeus?
No, no.
Um, so Derrida apparently really likes talking about this concept called the Cora, and it's in Plato's Timaeus. I haven't read the Timaeus either, but I've been more fascinated by this concept of the Cora. The Cora is apparently has to do with Plato's cosmology,
Mm-hmm.
but the Cora is like this nameless, indeterminable receptacle, basically. And I really like the way it's described. It receives everything, but does not become anything.
Wow.
And I thought, even though for Derrida, the Cora is something that the subject is always inscribed in, so to speak. But I thought, as subjects, we can mimic something like the Cora, where we receive everything but don't become anything. And I thought that was like a really beautiful like sentiment to sort of like living, where I am taking everything in, but I am not striving to become anything. I am open to any form of subjectivity, any impression that wants to sort of come my way. And then I take a risk because I have to take a risk. I have to decide. I have to make a choice at the end of the day.
Yeah. 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 And that's you might be somebody might say with a skepticism like, okay, that universal being, Cora, I think that that's the Cora. Why are we describing ourselves? But actually we are. It's part of what we are is that Cora. That's part of like the universe or the reality, whatever it is, whatever it is that is the basic material of the world that is in us. It's like coming forth in us, and we have a choice of being faithful to it. And one of the ways in which we can be faithful to it is not to over identify with any of our roles. Like if I'm a philosophy professor, I'm not just a philosophy professor completely melted into that, is that role, or an investor, investing banker, or I'm not just that. uh, I'm able to step back from that role and be something else.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard to do that, and especially for people who follow a strict timeline of doing this, doing that, doing that. And that's my next step. I have a 5-year plan. This whole 5-year plan thing, the interview question,
Yeah,
it completely crushes that inner Cora,
it does.
because like this is your timeline. You belong to this timeline, and it has to work in according to this sequence. It's too rigid.
It's funny because I would get these counselings that the army is supposed to give you, and a part of like the regular counseling is like you're supposed to like give them your immediate like goal, and then like your 5 years goal, and then like your
Right.
10 years goal, right? And I always hated it so much, because
Yeah.
I'm like, I keep saying, I'm like, how do I know? How do I know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it has never worked out. I mean, I've had 5-year plans before, but it's like, I ended up laughing at it later. It was like, what a joke. I thought I would be doing that. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you one more thing about YouTube.
Mm,
Uh, so you've been through a lot in the past year or so. You've been through a lot, and a lot of things have changed. But your presence on social media, uh, on YouTube, on Substack, it has stayed. That
mm,
has persisted. It has changed a little bit in its quality and content, but has the role of these social media, your engagement, has it found a different place in your life among other pieces of your life, among other activities that you may be more pressured to do, like doing a job to pay the bills? And where's the place of these kinds of conversations in your life? Because for me, I went
mm,
through a phase where I felt like I cannot do this anymore. This is too impractical. I need to just
mm,
focus on taking care of finances of my life. This is such a luxury. Uh, and then I kind of slowly recovered from it. I was like, oh, no, no, no,
mm,
no, no. It's like, even if I take care of that, this still has a place. And actually, in fact, I'm doing all that for this. Ultimately,
mm,
this is what I want. The conversation
mm.
at the end of the day, you know.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
mean, that's a good question, because it's funny because my answer is probably very similar to Daniel in your guys' talk, because I find myself like, even though I have homework and I have papers to write, and there's all this pressure, sometimes I'm like, I have such like a burning passion, like I have such a burning passion in that moment to like just pop on the camera and just talk about the ideas that have just been like seething in my mind for such a while, and to write them down, and to talk about them with people, that for me, I'm just like, for me, I'm like, you know what, I'm willing to take the lesser grade, the whatever the case may be, a lack of a product, not fully finished product, if I can make time for this, if
Yeah.
I will surrender parts of what is demanded of me to do this, and
Yeah.
that I feel very passionate for, because it's like, it gives me such a like, there's something about it that's so like ecstatic, and lively, and I really can't imagine myself really without it. I mean, I could do without the medium, sure, but the conversations, that is something that it's just not something that you encounter. It's like the impossible, really.
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah.
it really is like the impossible when you
Yeah.
have like a group of people and you have them together. I think Daniel's the Net is a very close example of the impossible. You don't know what you're going to get out of that conversation.
Right. Right. The net is in general really great. It's really great. I really applaud Daniel's taking responsibility for that. And there are so many people who want to do things like that. They want to be part of things like that, but they don't take any responsibility for it because they think that what if it goes wrong? What if like other people laugh at me? So yeah, I love the Garners uh, for many reasons. Partly for one reason is that they're so responsible and creative, and creatively responsible and responsibly creative. And I have a similar kind of gratitude towards you and towards your work. I'm really happy that your YouTube channel continues to be uh, such an inspiring place. This timing explorations it was so great, because every once in a while you just out of nowhere you introduce a new framework, you introduce a new concept, and I feel like this concept can cast a new light on almost everything. It's like it's like a new explosion that is,
Mhm.
you realize, oh, everything now is charged with new potential. Everything that I
Mhm.
thought about before, Don Quixote, being opportunistic, you can think about them now through this lens of timing and action and conditions. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because like lately it's weird because I finally feel like I am coming into like my own thinking. It's weird because it's like, for the longest time, I didn't really feel like I was into my own thinking. I was sort of just, in this process of just trying to process philosophers and sort of repeating what they're saying. But there is something now where it's like I'm taking what they're saying and I can just like imagine new concepts, things that are lacking in their systems. And I think timing was something that it's like there is no philosophy that there's so much philosophy about time. There's no philosophy about timing, about decision making, about how do I live with myself with decisions that I have already are done with, right? It's funny because when you talk about the past is something that was possible, but is no longer possible because it's in the past. There's a kind of impossibility about the past. And yet there's something about the impossibility of the past that we make possible to bring into the future. And that was like my whole thing about, fate and destiny, where it's like fate is just sort of like this, it's almost like a nihilism almost. Like I'm just going to take what's coming because I've made these decisions and so on, right? But there's a sort of way to turn and shape and something that I've recently called chronopoiesis, time making time. It's not making time in the sense of like you're going to prioritize things and values, but it's more like using time as a sort of material that is given to you. How do we play with time to where even if I have made decisions in the past, you can shape that into something else? Like, how do you do that? And that's what I'm like working on.
Yeah.
How do you shape? How do you work with time as if it was your own creative partner? Because there is something beautiful about, because if you think about an artwork, right? You make the art, and yet time itself impresses on the art by making it give that nice old antique look. It still works on your piece of art
Yeah.
despite your being done with it.
Yeah.
So how do you work with time to creatively shape things and where you stand back and you say, now I will let time take its creative pulse into this,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
And
that
that
is what
other,
I
like,
did.
yeah, there's another well-known phrase. They say time is against us, And what you're proposing is to go to kind of critique that and say,
Mhm,
no, time is not necessarily against us. It can work in a way, maybe work with time.
mhm,
And when you spoke about that, I also had this image of doing a similar thing with religious material. How can I
mhm,
how can I treat my religious faith, the fate of our fate in the form of religions, and receive that as a gift, receive that as raw material with which I can now do stuff.
mhm.
Doesn't have to be like I'm stuck and now I'm
Yeah,
like you're in the post-religious, era. Doesn't have to be that way. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Javier, thank you so much.
No
There's a lot
problem.
to explore. Maybe we can do it another time, but looking forward to your reflections. Everybody who's listening to us, please go and check out Javier's channel. It's a great place uh, to reflect and be and dwell. Thank you,
Thank you.
Javier. Let me stop the recording.